So with the Battlefield 2042 beta finally concluding, man am I gonna miss it. And me, according to Origin, clocking in around 54 hours along with getting all the way up to level 40 in-game, I think I'm not only qualified to talk about my thoughts on the beta, but also I just want to do it. So that's going to be the purpose of this video. I did everything. I played by myself, I used all of the vehicles extensively, I used all of the weapons extensively, I played in squads. I'm pretty sure I covered every single base I possibly could when it comes to the beta and did just about everything. Overall, my reception on the beta as a whole, just to spoil the video right off the bat, is that I'm simultaneously really happy with it and really worried about it. And if you couldn't tell by the title of the video, I feel like they took a lot of steps back with the game that I don't quite understand. But that kind of stuff I'll definitely get into later. Despite all the problems though, I had some of the most fun that I've had playing Battlefield in a long time, and I think the hours obviously reflect that. If I wasn't having a good time, then I wouldn't put almost 2 days worth of game time into a game that was only available for 4 days. So overall, the goal of the video is simply to talk about what I liked and what I didn't like. I think a few of the things that I liked and disliked are probably going to be hot takes, because I've seen a lot of people saying things that I do not think. And so always remember that if you don't agree with something that I say in the video, you don't have to be mean about it and you're allowed to disagree. It's commonplace on the internet for people to attack people that they don't know because of the anonymity of it, but you don't want to be that guy. I'm not being mean to you, don't be mean to me. It's just not necessary. With that being said, I'm going to start off talking about the positive things and the things that I liked about the 2042 beta, and then I'll get to the negative things after the fact. Kicking things off, and I'm going to talk about the specialist gadgets and traits. And this is one of those things that, like I said, is probably going to be pretty controversial. I see nothing but specialist hate everywhere I go. Nobody likes specialists. And for the characters themselves and the way they're implemented, I'm probably also on that boat. But when it comes to the gadgets and traits, I was nothing but pleasantly surprised. Because initially, going into the beta, I think I was like a lot of you guys. I went in and I was like, wow, well, I'm not going to use half of these, and there's going to be just one that's better than all the rest, and you're going to be seeing nothing but that running around, and it's going to suck. And I actually experienced the exact opposite through all of the time I played. The specialist gadgets and traits are all extremely unique and play to their own strengths. And because of that, it actually becomes a difficult decision as to what specialist I wanted to play every match. There wasn't a one-size-fits-all specialist that was just outright better than all the rest. I think that Casper was easily the weakest in the beta, but all three other specialists that we had access to were hard choices to make. McKay's unrivaled mobility with the grapple hook and the ability to strafe faster while you were ADS'd was really powerful. But to contrast that, being able to have unlimited self and team heals and revive your teammates back to full health and revive them quicker by using Falk could have been invaluable, especially when playing with squad mates. And Boris, the specialist that I thought I was gonna play hands down the least, actually was one of my favorites to use. Initially, I thought that the sentry gun was just going to be the camper's tool. It would be a chore to use and a chore to play against. But surprisingly, the turret is a lot of fun to use. It deploys quickly, and the best utility of it isn't even the turret itself. It's the fact that when your turret starts shooting at someone, it outlines them with a red outline, making it really easy to ID them and take them out. And even Casper, who I thought was hands down the worst specialist, still had the ability to put C4 on his drone, which led to hilarity, and the motion sensor, while not being great, was a pretty good utility to have. So overall, the specialist gadgets and traits I really enjoyed. Moving past that to another potentially controversial one, and that's the plus system. Another gimmick that I thought that I would never use and was stupid, and I didn't understand why they put it in the game. And 50 hours later, and I totally understand why they put it in the game, and it's actually really enjoyable to use and get the hang of, as well as adding a little bit more of a skill ceiling that you can get used to while playing the game. I think the biggest thing that comes out of the plus system is the different ammo types that you can swap between. And I really enjoyed the way they balanced all these different ammo types. The fact that if you wanted to run long-range ammo, you had less magazine capacity, so it would be a lot harder to spray and pray, but you would be rewarded if you hit your shots at longer ranges. Or the fact that your range gets absolutely nuked if you put on ammo that increases your fire rate. Not only that, but I felt like all the ammo types that I got to use didn't just outright make you a one-man army. If you put on the close range ammo for the M5 and ran up against a K30, you're still gonna lose at close range. So it doesn't just completely trivialize the use of submachine guns, but if you are running the close range ammo and you run up against someone using the medium range ammo at close range, you're probably gonna win that fight, and so it rewards you for using the system. That on top of the fact that I finally got to use some of the longer range scopes on assault rifles and LMGs, which in other Battlefield games, I, as well as pretty much everyone else I'd ever seen, never got a chance to use these scopes because if you ran into a close range engagement, you would just die. So being able to throw on a 4X in applicable situations was really fun, and overall the Plus system I thoroughly enjoyed. I thought it would be just a pile of crap, and it was a lot of fun to use. Moving past that, and I've got squad-based vehicles. This was something that I was really looking forward to and was not let down by. I was always the guy that was driving around the transport helicopter in Battlefield 4, and I always felt like it was extremely underpowered, and that's because, frankly, it was. The transport vehicles in all the previous Battlefield games just lost to the single flyer attack vehicles. I don't know any other way to put that. But in 2042, having a stacked out transport vehicle is going to win against some of those other things like attack helicopters. And so if you have the teamwork and coordination, it can really work out in your favor. Hands down, the most fun that I had in the game was flying around the Condor and the Super Hind. Those two vehicles are a blast, especially if you have friends in them. And even if you don't and you're just flying around with randoms, being able to really sway the match and take points by hovering one of those death machines over top of it felt really good. I wish I had more of a chance to use the ground vehicles, but because of the camera glitch in the gunners, I didn't want to be a gunner, nor did I want to subject any of my friends to being gunners, so I really didn't get a chance to experience the squad-based gameplay of using tanks and the AA. But when it came to the air transports, oh my god, are they a fun time. Next, and more on the controversial side once again, and it's all guns on all the different classes. I know that people are really upset about this, but finally having the freedom to use whatever weapon I wanted at any given time was liberating playing in a Battlefield game. I've been technically playing the franchise since I was a kid all the way back in the Battlefield 2 era, and since then I've always kind of wished that they broke this tradition. I'll talk about it later when I get to the negatives about how I feel like gadgets and such should still be locked to classes, but when it comes to weapons, I'm really glad they unlocked them this time around. I know there's a lot of people that have been going around saying that everyone's just going to pick whatever the meta gun is and you're never going to see anything else because of this system. And over all of the hours I put into all the different Battlefield games, I just can't see this being the case. I think people seriously overestimate the average player of these games because absolutely the majority of people are not looking into the meta and whatever the best gun is, and I can tell that by just playing Battlefield 4. If you hop into a game of Battlefield 4, not everyone is running around with an AEK on medic. It's just not true. If you go to Battlefield 5, not everyone is running around with a Turner SMLE on assault or a Type 2A on medic. Do you see quite a few of them? Absolutely. Is everyone running around with them? No. And so the idea that everyone's going to run around with some sort of god gun just doesn't really hold too much weight in my eyes. Never mind the fact that DICE has a tendency of being relatively decent with balancing stuff, so if there was a one-size-fits-all best gun, it would probably just get nerfed anyway. But now I feel like I'm justifying something that would be under negatives rather than talking about the positives, so I think we better move on. The next thing on my list is matchmaking and crossplay, and this is something that I was really worried about and was actually very pleasantly surprised by, and I think I've completely shifted my tone since before launch. Initially, I was crushed at the prospect of us losing the server browser, and I was pretty sure that we were going to lose it. And sure enough, we did lose the server browser. It's not here, and we probably won't see it. It might be part of Portal, but at least for all-out warfare, it's not going to be there. If you're thinking it will be, I would not hold your breath. But regardless of that, it started to dawn on me after playing so much Battlefield 5 recently that I actually think the lack of a server browser at the end of the day actually has quite a few merits. Obviously, losing out on community servers is a massive problem, and hopefully that will come back in some regard. But even if we don't get community servers, I don't think the game is dying anytime soon simply because crossplay exists now. On PC, you run into the same people over and over again every game on some of the older Battlefields, and frankly, it's tiring. And with crossplay enabled, I definitely did not see the same person at any point during my gameplay, and that was really refreshing. On top of the fact that with matchmaking forcing you to re-queue every single time, it stops the server stops over and over and over again, leading to an awful experience. Something that I honestly didn't even consider until I started playing with it. I'm sure a lot of you can vouch for my experience here if you've played any of the recent Battlefield games, but a lot of the time if you get into a server, especially if it has multiple well-coordinated squads on the other team, you'll lose, and then you'll lose again, and you'll lose again, and you'll lose again until those people back out of the server. And that experience is awful. And so the fact that if you get absolutely crushed, it forces everyone to re-queue means that you have less likelihood to run into those people again. And so those constant stomp cycles over and over again are extremely less likely. And so while initially I thought that this was going to be an awful change, I think I'm starting to warm up to it. The next thing that I have on my list here is the Vehicle Cooldown, which is something that I did not expect in the slightest and am really happy about, but I wish they could have done it a little bit differently. I honestly expected another Battlefield game where the same sweaty boys sit on the spawn screen and wait for vehicles to respawn every single time and never pick infantry ever. Thankfully, it looks like this time around there's a potential of that not being the case, something that I never expected. If you spawn in a vehicle from the spawn screen, the next time that you die and you respawn, the vehicle will be on cooldown for I think around a minute and a half, which lets other people spawn in the vehicles and makes it so that the same person can't just sit there and loop the vehicle over and over again, locking everyone else from using it. My only complaint here is that it only locks the category of vehicle and not the vehicles as a whole. And so that means if you spawn in a tank and die in a tank, then you can spawn in a helicopter, and then you die in the helicopter, and then you can spawn back in a tank. If it were up to me, I would make it so that if you die, all the vehicles except for the Jeeps obviously would go on cooldown if you spawned in any of them for a minute and a half. I think that's fine as it is. It's not going to stop some people from cheesing the system with friends and rotating each other out constantly, and I don't really know if there is a fix for that, but at the very least there was an attempt made here, and I didn't think there would be, so I'm very happy about it. And finally, the last thing on the positive side of things, and that's the gunplay. And this is going to be a positive and negative, and it's the first thing that's on my negatives list. So as soon as I'm finished up talking about the positives about it, I'll talk about the negatives. But overall, I felt like the gunplay was responsive and I enjoyed it. And I think that's a hot take because there's a lot of people that are saying that the gunplay feels like Call of Duty. And I agree, the gunplay feels like Call of Duty. But I'm gonna let you in on a little secret here. There's a reason that a lot of people play Call of Duty. And the biggest draw of Call of Duty is shooting people. And shooting people in Call of Duty feels good. So it's honestly lost on me why people think that the Call of Duty gun mechanics in a Battlefield game are a bad thing. I'm someone who's played both franchises extensively. Shocking, I know. It's almost as if you can play both franchises and not just lock yourself to one. And what I can tell you, despite the fact that Call of Duty has lost me in the last few years, is that it feels good in Call of Duty games to shoot people. So overall, the more arcadey Call of Duty gun style mechanics are something that I can enjoy. Now moving over to the negatives about gunplay, and that's where we start getting into problems with weapon balance and weapon type balance. If you played the beta at all, you'll know that there was a whole lot of M5A3, and that's because that gun could laser you from basically any range. Why it could do that? Your guess is as good as mine. But one of the biggest problems that I felt like 2042 had when I was playing it was the fact that a lot of the weapon types just felt outright useless. The shotgun was horrible. It was hands down the worst shotgun I've ever used in any game. It was unforgivable how bad the shotgun was. The sniper rifles being a close second. The sniper we had access to felt completely useless. At long range, you'd just lose to assault rifles. So while it felt great to use the LMGs, ARs, and SMGs, if you ever equipped the DMR, the sniper rifle, or the shotgun, you would just get dumpstered a lot of the time. And it was even more funny because the pistol, the Glock that we had access to, was also actually quite good and could put up competition with these other guns and was just outright better than the shotgun. So I just don't really understand that. Something needs to be done. In my opinion, I think they should just buff up the sniper rifles rather than nerf everything else, but who knows, I don't make the decisions and I have no sway over there anyway. Past that, and I think the biggest thing and the reason for the title of this video is missing features. Battlefield 2042 took a step forward and then took 2 steps back. The phrasing usually goes that something took 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but in this case I feel like it's the opposite. It feels like they almost tried to make progress, but then we lost out on a whole lot else. There was a Reddit post I came across earlier that I really vibed with because it was a lot of the things that I was complaining about that were missing. Simple things like the communications wheel where you can request ammo or thank people for things in-game is gone. And that kind of stuff you'd think would be there because of their huge emphasis on specialists and personality. But nope, not present. The incoming medics text at the right hand of your screen that tells you where medics are or how close they are, gone and replaced with this weird outline thing that tells you who's a medic and who's a squad mate, but sometimes doesn't work properly and also forces you to do 360 camera swipes to see if there's any medics nearby. How hard was it to just put the incoming medics text like in the past few Battlefield games? I just don't understand it. Text chat and voice chat were just outright missing. Why? Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. Supply boxes being on the points from Battlefield 5 that made it feel like you could actually reinforce areas since you wouldn't just instantly run out of ammo were also gone. More innovations that they just got rid of. Being able to take ammo or health from support classes by going up and interacting with them, also gone. The list goes on, and I'm sure there are a ton more that are passing up my mind right now. But the end-all be-all is, we lost a lot more than it felt like we gained with this title. And that's my biggest worry. Even simple stuff like being able to tell how much damage you've done to a target is completely removed. There are just so many things missing, and it doesn't feel like there was enough added to make up for the missing stuff. So many no-brainers just gone. Definitely the thing I'm worried about the most. And on that same topic of being able to tell how much damage you did, the terrible UI and lack of visual info was also a serious problem. It's no secret that the UI in this game is not good. But I think the real kicker here isn't the UI, it's the lack of visual info that you get. Simple things like something telling you if someone has an ammo box or a health box is completely absent, which means that you can see their specialist and it might have an ammo thing over their head, but it does not necessarily mean that they have ammo. In fact, odds are they don't have ammo, so there's no way of knowing if they have ammo. Like I already said, when you shoot things, there's no indication on how much damage you've actually done. When people get kills in your vehicle, you don't get any sort of indication when they've killed someone unless you see it in the kill feed and it's a squad mate. The kill feed itself is all white for some reason, which means that you can't tell when a squad mate or a teammate's been killed versus when an enemy has been killed. These simple UI problems just lead to a poor experience. And speaking of the lack of identification, the awful enemy identification is also a problem and nothing new to anyone in the community, I'm sure. The idea of having all of the same specialists on every single team makes IDing friend from foe really difficult at times. And a lot of the time, I would find myself just blasting teammates because I would shoot the first thing I saw just in case. Because if you didn't do that, you'd probably end up getting killed by someone that you thought was a teammate. And I've heard that they're going to add red and blue lights on the characters in order to ID friend from foe, and to me that's just kind of sad that they needed to take this ridiculous approach of making everyone glow like Christmas trees in order for you to be able to tell. In Battlefield 4, it was never a problem being able to tell friend from foe because the uniforms all look different. But in this game, everyone looks the same. I know that each uniform is a slightly different tint, but you can't tell. You just can't. Finally, moving past that kind of stuff, and we're gonna move on to the fact that there are no classes in this game. The marketing team did a pretty good job of duping everyone into thinking that there would be classes by saying that there would be classes. And there are, they just don't mean anything. You have 4 different classes, but there's no real meaning to those classes other than their specialist gadget, which to me doesn't really add up. I already said that I don't think that the weapons should be locked by class again, because I think it's a better change if they weren't. But what I do think should be locked to classes in order to encourage team play more and make it so people pick different varieties of operators and gadgets is to lock the gadgets behind the classes we have. Stuff like having engineer operators being able to have access to rocket launchers and repair tools and that kind of stuff. It'll never happen, but it's something that I think would help to bring back the more class-style gameplay. If the classes are in the game, then you might as well use them or just take them out, because as it stands right now, the little class text means nothing. Seeing someone as a support doesn't mean anything. The next thing on here is the anti-vehicle options, and this is where I got really lost. The anti-vehicle options in this game are extremely bipolar for your soldier. Against air vehicles, the Stinger is abysmal. And considering how many people there are on the map, it kind of makes sense for the Stinger to suck, but I wish they'd balanced it differently. As it stands, the Stinger takes forever to lock on, and a lot of the time, the rocket will just straight up miss its target. But if it does hit its target, it does a sizable amount of damage, and if I remember correctly, it can two-shot helicopters. This may be false. If I got it wrong, my bad. But I'm fairly certain, based on what I played, that's what it was like. Now, the real kicker here is that there was no indication on where you were getting locked on from when you were in a vehicle, which in my opinion was the best change and biggest buff to lock-ons from Battlefield 4. In Battlefield 4, if you got locked on, it would tell you where they're locking from with a little indicator, and the helicopter pilot would just fly over there and kill the guy locking on, no problem. Now you can't do that, and you have to actually pay attention to where the rocket came from in order to ID the shooter. But because of rockets missing, it felt like a lot of the time helicopters would be unstoppable without an AA or another helicopter to deal with it, no matter how many people were running Stingers. On the complete contrary end of that, the anti-ground vehicle rocket launcher was ridiculously overpowered to an absurd degree. The recoilless M5 is recoilless for a reason, because it shoots perfectly straight with a fast bullet velocity and 0 bullet drop. Now, that wouldn't be a huge problem if it did low damage to armor, but it doesn't. It does about a fourth of a tank's HP. This thing is so easy to use, I think a lobotomite could hit a tank from 100 meters with it. The only real balancing here is that it takes a long time to reload, but that doesn't really matter when you have 64 people on a team that could be running this at any time, and it's not locked to any sort of class or operator, so anyone can run it. Not only that, but C4 had a ton of range and could be thrown really quickly, so if you got close to a tank, it would just instantly die if you had C4, which admittedly on my end I didn't really have a problem with, since C4 probably should be powerful since you have to get close. But also, grenades did an absurd amount of damage to armor. Just 4 to 5 grenades are able to kill a tank, and every soldier has access to 2 grenades. So if people knew this, a squad could take down a tank by just chucking nades at it. So you don't even need to run the rocket launcher. Overall, I just felt like the ground vehicles were incredibly underpowered a lot of the time. And that was compounded by the tank and flight controls, which is the final negative I have on my list here. The tank and flight controls were abysmal in the beta, at least on mouse and keyboard. Starting off with the tank controls, and this was a mess. I think that they artificially nerfed the controls on purpose in order to make tanks weaker, which, if there weren't so many ridiculous anti-vehicle weapons in the game that could instantly kill tanks by yourself, then this probably wouldn't be that huge of a problem. But because that isn't the case and it's so easy for people to destroy tanks, the fact that the aiming feels super floaty and the tank takes forever to rotate and just feels bad to use, it's a problem. Now on the end of flight controls, and this is something that I know isn't going anywhere because it appeals to the masses and makes EA money. And that really kills me, because the flight controls are horrible. As a veteran of Battlefield 4 and someone who took the time to master the jets and the helicopters, at least to a degree, maybe master is going too far. I wasn't as good as some of the really good pro players, but I could definitely hold my own and fly under stuff and whatnot with the little bird at the very least, if that's a good indication. But regardless of my own skills, the Battlefield 4 helicopter controls and jet controls, in my opinion, were perfect. And so because of that, the way they altered them in 2042 2 feels horrible. All the helicopters feel like they're floating in some sort of limbo and fly themselves. And the reason they feel this way is to pander to the majority. Most people have a hard time flying helicopters and just flying vehicles in most games in general. So what DICE opted to do here was to make everything as easy to fly as possible. And by doing this, they completely removed the weight of all the air vehicles. That's the biggest problem I saw here. Helicopters especially do not have weight to them. You can point your helicopter damn near straight down and not go down. That's absurd. Never mind being able to completely stop momentum and change your direction on a dime. These things all affect the way you fly, as well as affect the way that people combat flyers. If you turn your helicopter sideways, the helicopter should rocket towards the ground really quickly because it's heavy and your rotor isn't bringing you upwards. That's how physics work. But in this game, pointing your helicopter sideways just starts making you go sideways. That's so weird. Never mind the fact that the helicopter is constantly pulling itself upwards, trying to make sure that you can't point at the ground so you don't crash. And overall, the controls just felt bad. And on the other end of it, trying to combat the flying vehicles sucked. In previous games, you could lead your target because they had a certain weight to them and they'd always end in the specific spots. Getting the hang of shooting helicopters out of the sky with a tank was all practice in Battlefield 4, because if you saw a helicopter moving a certain way, you knew where it'd end up based on the weight that it had and the inertia. But all of that is gone, and so you can aim at a helicopter that's going past you, and it should go past you, continue going down, and then start to pull up, but instead, it just keeps going forward, and you can't hit it. And so helis can just sit above you and do circles, and there's nothing you can do about it. So on both ends, it sucks. But you know what? It appeals to the majority, so it's not going anywhere. And that sucks. So there you have it. There's all my thoughts on the Battlefield 2042 beta after all the hours that I put into it. As I already said, I'm actually really looking forward to the launch of the game, and I had a lot of fun with it. And the biggest thing that I'm hoping for is that the missing features that we didn't have in the beta are going to show up in the main game. All this other stuff, if it doesn't get fixed, isn't going to be a deal breaker for me, but it definitely will be disappointing. And there's no way that DICE didn't get a lot of feedback, so I'll be interested to see what they decide to do with that feedback. I hope that they don't just blindly follow a lot of it, because I think they'll end up with a worse game if they do that. If there's anything I've learned from being in the gaming space for as long as I have, it's that most of the time, blindly listening to the community ends poorly. I'm of the opinion that developers should more often than not go with their gut than blindly listen to community feedback. That obviously doesn't mean that they shouldn't take community feedback into consideration, but at the end of the day, all these people that are playing the game are not making the game. And so disrupting the creative vision of the people that are making the game because people are complaining doesn't often end well from what I've seen. But who knows, that's probably a hot take, and I'm sure a lot of people disagree with that. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. But regardless of your feelings, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Feel free to go down there and talk about what you agreed with me on and what you didn't. I'm always interested to see dissenting opinions. I've probably seen most of them already, but who knows? Don't attack me though. I won't reply to those. With that though, I'm done here. I don't think there's much else I can say. I'm sure I'll be cursing at myself later because I probably missed some important stuff, but if I sit here thinking about it any longer, this video will never get finished. So if you enjoyed the video and you liked what I had to say, you can leave a like, subscribe. If you didn't and you thought I was absolutely full of shit and all my opinions suck, then you can leave a dislike and never watch anything I make ever again. And with all that being said, have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you next time.